Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Throne of Seal based on novel. So let's start. Yating had been following Long Houchen for a long time, and from the time she started following him, she knew about the relationship between Long Houchen and Kia. Because she understood Long Houchen very well, she knew it was impossible for her to be with him even if she had a body. Since that was the case, she could only take a step back and be his younger sister, to live and die together with him. The body of the Queen of the Moon slowly floated up, and a pair of transparent golden wings slowly spread out from her back, indicating that the fusion between Yating and her body was progressing extremely smoothly. 1 pair, 2 pairs, 3 pairs, 4 pairs. When her wings reached 4 pairs, Long Houchen revealed a faint smile on his face. This meant that after the fusion, at least Yating's cultivation hadn't weakened. Right at this moment, the 5th pair of wings suddenly spread out. In contrast to the previous 4 pairs, these 5th pair of wings were actual a light blue color, not a light golden color. Success! Long Houchen clenched his fists in excitement. Although he removed the darkness attribute from Queen of the Moon's body, he retained the water attribute. Water and light were the source of life, and with the addition of Long Houchen's light god bloodline, Yating's body could be made even more perfect. In terms of bloodline, she was perhaps a bit inferior to Long Houchen, but she with her dual attributes could also use the power of creation. Immediately after the 5th pair of wings, there was the 6th pair. All 6 pairs, 12 wings, slowly stretched behind Yating. 8 of them were golden, 4 blue. It looked dazzling. The fluctuations of spiritual energy on Yating's body were extremely astonishing, and they faintly emitted a multicolored halo. This was similar to the effect of the light god domain after Long Houchen's evolution. But the difference was that of the 7 colors, 3 of them were the most striking, while the other 4 gradually faded, seeming to be swallowed by the 3 colors. The 3 striking colors are golden, blue and green. 3 colored halos revolved around Yating's body, the most powerful of them being the golden color. The original head of Queen of the Moon's black hair was completely dyed in this golden color. The blue color changed into a long skirt, and the green color changed into the color of Yating's eyes. At this very moment, Yating's aura even surpassed Long Houchen's, forming a field of fluctuations with 3 colors. Her power was so great that she was already approaching Eastern's king. Eastern's king came to Long Houchen's side, bowing slightly to Yating. "Welcome, Elf King of Light." Yating nodded slightly to Eastern's king, her green eyes full of life. She gazed at Long Houchen with a gentle look, her 2 hands making a few consecutive gestures in front of her chest, and a strange pattern of light immediately floated out, flying towards Long Houchen's chest. Long Houchen was startled. He didn't understand what Yating was trying to do, but he believed that Yating wouldn't harm him, so he unconsciously brought the pattern of light back to her. When the patterns entered his hand, they instantly merged with his body and disappeared. Immediately, Long Houchen's body shook violently, and Yating quivered at the same time. A golden bridge quickly appeared between the two, connecting with their chests. Long Houchen felt his own spiritual energy rising at an astonishing speed. His Heart of Eternity had already increased by 90,000 units, and after breaking through to the 3rd rank of the 9th step, his strength exceeded 300,000 units. At this moment, he only felt his acupuncture points being opened from top to bottom. In a short period of time, his internal spiritual energy increased by 50,000 units. It had reached 350,000. However, there was no joy on his face, only a trace of helplessness. "Yating, what are you doing?" "Yating, no, I should call her Long Yating right now." She, who had inherited Queen of the Moon's beautiful appearance, revealed a smile to Long Houchen. "My body and life were given by Big Brother. If one day you aren't here, what's the point of living? Furthermore, the contract has already been completed, so it cannot be changed." So that simple rune from earlier was actual Yating's blood contract. In her body was Long Houchen's blood, and after completing the blood contract, she gave a reply to Long Houchen. Relying on a cultivation even more formidable than Long Houchen's, she forcefully covered up the aura of the blood contract, to the extent that Long Houchen didn't even notice. After the completion of the blood contract, Long Houchen was naturally affected by the contract, and his cultivation greatly increased, just like his relationship with Haoyue. Spreading the 12 wings on her back, Yating flashed to Long Houchen's side, hugging his left arm and giggling, "With a blood contract connecting us, this brother will never leave me." Long Houchen touched her head with some helplessness. "You really are a silly girl." Eastern's king looked at Long Houchen, then at Yating, revealing a smile and muttering to himself, "This should be the best ending." Right at this moment, the surrounding time returned to a still state. Long Houchen was startled, and at the same time, this emotionless voice sounded in his mind once again. "Not lost in the benefits, looking for true knowledge in the illusion. Wash the darkness with light and shape it between light and water. You have passed the first test. The admiration and friendliness of Eastern's king are the greatest gains you have made in this test." Hearing these words, the first thing Long Houchen thought to do was as he expected. This should be a hint that belonged to the divine throne of eternity and creation. It wasn't something that had to be done, and there were even misleading existences. If he didn't spread the plot of the Queen of the Moon, or if he found out and followed the instructions, he was afraid that the test would have already failed. This test of the divine throne of eternity and creation was not only about strength, but also about humanity and wisdom. However, this was only the first test. What would be the next test? Right at that moment, a resonant dragon cry suddenly resounded in the cave. Long Houchen was startled. King Easton's face immediately turned ugly. Is it over yet? The holy dragon has come to harass my Easton, relying on the mount that he is god of creation. As he spoke, King Easton had already left the cave. Long Houchen knew that this holy dragon's arrival was probably closely related to his next assessment, and didn't dare slack off. Hurriedly, he and Yating flew out together. After exiting the cave, he and Yating unconsciously raised their heads to look at the sky, because the original blue sky had already changed their expressions. The entire sky was filled with a holy aura, filled with majesty and oppression. The colors of the rainbow halo caused Easton's world to change colors. King Easton floated in midair. He stared off into the distance with a brilliant light in his eyes. A dot of light was flying towards him at lightning speed. Long Houchen's eyesight was excellent, but before he could take a closer look, the speck of light from before had already enlarged in his line of sight. It was a dragon, a true dragon. There were no wings on its back, and its slender body was over 30 meters long. Its entire body was covered in golden scales, and there were 5 claws underneath its stomach, and 2 horns on its head. Its imposing eyes were fixed on them, and as it approached rapidly, all the rainbow colors in the sky started to fluctuate. King Easton roared angrily, "Holy dragon, are you finished? If you have nothing better to do, just come over and take a look. I just don't know if you have any." The holy dragon snorted coldly. "Dwarf, aren't you afraid that your followers will change their faith? If you have the ability, you can come to my divine dragon island as well. I didn't come looking for you today. It was God's will. Human, defeating me is the second test you have to face." Just as King Easton was about to say something, a jade-green ray of light suddenly fell from the sky and shone on his body. Immediately, King Easton felt a cold shiver down his spine and did not say anything. He could only apologetically shake his head at Long Houchen. It was pure natural power, filled with endless vitality. The only thing that made King Easton feel helpless was his faith, which came from the power of the Lord of Nature. It was obvious that the test of the divine throne of eternity and creation wouldn't be reduced by the relationship between him and King Easton. What Long Houchen didn't know was that his original second trial should have been to endure for half an hour without losing under the attack of the holy dragon. But because of his resurrection of Yating, the difficulty of the examination increased accordingly. Since it was a test, then it was unavoidable. Words were useless, and Long Houchen nodded in response, "Please." As he spoke, his body flashed, and he transformed into a beam of golden light that soared high into the sky. At the same time, the light god's domain also expanded, as if it were a taboo as it flew towards the holy dragon's domain that covered the entire horizon. At the same time, a multicolored brilliance glinted along with Long Houchen's flight, and when he reached a height of a few thousand meters, a holy unicorn appeared. Although the battle hadn't started yet, Long Houchen had a rough understanding of the holy dragon's strength. As the most powerful magical beast he knew, as well as a powerhouse that even King Easton couldn't do anything about, this holy dragon was at least at the 9th rank 5th stage of cultivation. What was even scarier was that his physical strength wasn't any worse than his spiritual energy. The only thing that gave Long Houchen a chance was his domain. All divine attribute creatures were mainly made of light, and his light god domain could be said to be the origin of all light elements, enough to counter the holy dragon in this regard. That was why he wanted to test out what would happen if his domain came into contact with the divine dragon domain. As the two domains clashed in midair, the distant King Easton suddenly had a strange feeling in his heart. As soon as Long Houchen's light god domain entered the divine domain of the holy dragon, it was just like a piece of hot iron being pressed against a piece of butter. Hiss, hiss, hiss. The sky was also filled with 7 colors of light, but the divine domain was lacking the golden foundation of the light god domain. It rapidly rushed forward, spreading, and not only did it not suppress Long Houchen, it was instead occupied by him. Heh! What a pure power of light. No wonder he has the qualifications to ask me to make a move. The holy dragon gave Long Houchen a curious look, but its movements didn't stop, as a multicolored breath aimed straight at him. Riding on the holy unicorn, Long Houchen revealed a faint smile. With a raise of his right hand, the multicolored golden light of the light god domain burst forth like a tsunami, rapidly dispersing the divine domain of the holy dragon. At the same time, it clashed against his breath. The breath of the holy dragon was rapidly weakened, but after the golden color light disappeared, the other colors of light still rushed at Long Houchen. Without waiting for Long Houchen to make a move, Yating's body flashed, appearing in front of him. She spread the 12 wings on her back, and pointed her right hand at that surprise attack. In midair, a 100-meter-long sword of light appeared out of nowhere. With a flash of light, it cut through the breath of the holy dragon. Immediately afterwards, it headed straight for the main body of the holy dragon. At the same time, a layer of energy belonging to the domain of Yating condensed around her body. It was also of the light attribute, but the difference from Long Houchen's light god domain was that Yating's light was just like the noon sunlight, piercing and sharp. The huge sword of light that was 100 meters long sparkled with a dazzling golden light in the sky. It advanced forward in a kingly way. Was this a domain skill? But Yating's domain skills were too easy to use. There was no preparation at all. However, the golden great sword clearly carried her domain aura. The holy dragon was shocked. As a recipient, it had the strongest impression of the sword's aura. The unadorned but indescribably destructive king's sword caused him to not dare to be careless. The huge body swayed in the air, and a rainbow bolt of lightning shot out from the two horns on his head. The two bolts of lightning merged together in the air, before shooting towards the huge golden sword. Amidst the violent rumbling, the golden great sword paused in the air for a moment before multicolored lightning began to swirl around it. Yating let out a cold snort, quickly turning her hands in front of her chest with a few complicated gestures. She pressed down again. Immediately, the golden light on the great sword burst out, forcibly breaking through the multicolored light. It was still as tyrannical as ever as it slashed towards the holy dragon. This is domain weapons. Eastern's king's eyes were wide open in the distance. He had a lingering fear of Yating's power. Domain weapons. This was the first time Long Houchen heard of such a thing. However, seeing the situation in front of him, he could faintly guess that Yating's domain was a special type of domain. She used her domain as a weapon, but it wasn't a domain skill. That great sword should be her domain weapon. It was very likely due to the fact that she merged all the energy from the two swords during her recovery, which gave her this kind of special evolution. From the way Yating acted just now, Long Houchen could feel that in terms of spiritual energy, she wasn't that much inferior to Eastern's king. Just like Eastern's king, they were most likely both powerhouses of the 4th rank of the 9th step, while that holy dragon probably reached the 5th rank of the 9th step. The reason why he guessed that holy dragon was at the 5th rank of the 9th step was because Long Houchen was helplessly watching his whole body suddenly turn into 7 colors. Flinging his body, he rapidly dodged the golden great sword, while at the same time ferociously striking the sword's spine with his tail. He sent the golden great sword flying to the side. Yating's body trembled slightly, and the golden great sword in the air seemed to stall for a moment. She had just obtained a body. Although her cultivation had evolved to the level of the elf king, she was not proficient at controlling it. Long Houchen pointed his right hand at Yating, and immediately, a multicolored golden light rushed out just like 100 rivers flowing in the ocean. He had a blood contract with Yating, and their strength came from the same source. After his domain enveloped her, Yating immediately became imposing, and her two hands drew a circle in the air, letting out 10,000 rays of light, forming a screen of light in the air, forcibly suppressing the approaching holy dragon. The holy dragon was depressed. Although Yating's domain weapon was very powerful, under normal circumstances, it was still confident that it could win the battle in a short period of time. However, Long Houchen's domain restrained its domain too strongly. After the main light attribute was weakened, Holy Dragon's strength was reduced by at least a third. Although its body was tough, it didn't dare clash head-on with Yating's domain weapon. For a moment, it was actually at a disadvantage. What made the Holy Dragon even more worried was that, along with her familiarity with the Golden Sword, as well as the amplification from Long Houchen's domain, Yating's attacks became more and more fierce. The Holy Dragon was constantly pushed back by her attacks, so it had no choice but to continuously use its domain to contend against them. Long Houchen withdrew his right hand, which was originally pointing towards the sky. Actually, he had already thought of a way to deal with the Holy Dragon, but he didn't expect Yating to have such an ability. Since that was the case, he was no longer in a hurry to reveal his trump card. Only God knew if there were any more difficult tests behind the divine throne of eternity and creation. The light god's domain was fully supplemented by Yating's domain, and the horn on the head of the holy unicorn unceasingly released rings of rainbow-colored halos, strengthening Long Houchen's spiritual energy. The Eastern world was a world full of vitality. Light was essential, and the light elements here were extremely pure. The reason why the Holy Dragon had come here so many times was because it liked the light elements. But at this moment, these light elements only acknowledged one master, and that was the light god domain. The suppression from the domain prevented the Holy Dragon from displaying its full strength. Under the joint attack of Long Houchen and Yating, there was actually no way to deal with them. Except for countering the huge golden sword, the Holy Dragon's gaze started to solidify, and a deep chant was chanted. His voice was very special, clearly belonging to the dragon race. His multicolor lights became colorful and brighter when he was chanting. Compared to the Holy Unicorn who only owned the pure light of, the Holy Dragon also possessed the 6 attributes of water, fire, earth, wind, thunder, and ice. With the addition of light, the 7 attributes were all gathered together. At this moment, he was unable to control the power of the light attribute, but he still had 6 other attributes he could control. In the midst of the incessant chants of the holy dragon, the sky seemed to boil, and a large amount of 6-colored halos appeared in the air, forming a halo that floated in the air. Dragon tongue magic. Long Houchen's expression became more serious. The holy dragon's dragon tongue magic was definitely the most powerful attack of the dragon race. On the Shungmor Dalu, even ordinary gigantic dragons were rare, let alone holy dragons. Even if there was one attribute missing, the power of this attack was extremely terrifying. Long Houchen couldn't help but raise his right hand. Big brother, let me do it, I can do it. Yating's firm voice resounded in Long Houchen's ears. Immediately after, her body transformed into a beam of light, flying towards her enormous golden sword. Yating's domain was called the King's Sword, which was a pure domain weapon. Domain weapons were existences that surpassed ordinary divine artifacts. The most powerful domain weapon was even capable of surpassing the power of a supradivine artifact. What was she going to do? Very quickly, Yating gave the answer. With a flash of light, her body disappeared from that king's sword. A golden light that was 100 times stronger than before suddenly burst out. A terrifying sword intention seemed to pierce through the sky and ascend into the sky. At this time, the holy dragon's dragon tongue magic was completed. In the sky, the phantom of 6 dragons over a kilometer long appeared, and each dragon released a powerful breath, directly bombarding Long Houchen. The breath of each dragon could match a supreme forbidden spell. The 6 dragon shadows activated at the same time. Immediately, the world changed colors, and the sun and moon lost their light. However, in the midst of this terrifying pressure, Yating's king's sword abruptly soared, and in the blink of an eye, became 1,000 meters long. The sword intent, the sword spirit, and the heart of the sword instantly merged into one. This was an indescribably terrifying power, and this sharpness was something Long Houchen had never seen before. If the violet gold moon sword formed by Hao Yue was the most powerful sword of destruction, then at this very moment, Yating's king's sword was the most powerful sword of the righteous noble. Long Houchen had already been using the aria of the goddess of light, blue rain, and hibiscus of light as weapons for a very long time. It could be said that any comprehension of swords had always been manifested with these 2 swords. After these 2 swords merged together with Yating, the memories attached to the swords, as well as Yating's own understanding of Long Houchen's fusion with Long Houchen, were added to the effects of Long Houchen's divine blood. This caused Yating's comprehension of the sword to reach a new height, surpassing even Long Houchen's. Because she had once been a sword spirit, countless rays of golden light flashed in the sky, as if countless golden pillars of light had appeared in the sky. The 6 terrifying breaths were immediately disordered by this golden light. Sword Star Rain. This was the Sword Star Rain. Long Houchen opened his eyes wide. That's right, the king's sword was used by the knight, and that was exactly the skill he used, the Sword Star Rain. But this was also the most powerful Sword Star Rain Long Houchen had ever seen. The gigantic body of the 6 dragons seemed to turn into lambs waiting to be slaughtered in front of the king's sword. With a glint of golden light, the king's sword transformed by Yating rotated in the air. Immediately, a golden line appeared on each dragon's neck. In the next moment, they completely collapsed. The scene left the holy dragon dumbstruck. Although his dragon tongue magic was guided by a dragon without a seat, it was still one of his strongest spells, yet it was destroyed by an opponent weaker than it. The power of a domain weapon had actually reached such a level. Furthermore, why can she use her self-incarnating domain despite even not being at the 5th rank of the 9th step? In the eyes of the holy dragon, the fusion of Yating and the king's sword was clearly a feature of self-incarnating domain. In fact, Yating was naturally unable to use her self-incarnating domain. She had transformed herself into the king's sword, thus activating the sword to unleash its strongest power. It could be said that the current her was 100 times, 1,000 times more powerful than she had been back then. After the king's sword broke through the holy dragon's spell, it immediately turned around and slashed at the head of the holy dragon without any hesitation. At this moment, the holy dragon began to panic as well. And there was no need to mention the grievances in his heart. Long Houchen's domain had too great an effect on it, and Yating's domain weapon was so domineering that Long Houchen didn't even directly intervene from afar, but he was already unable to resist it. With a roar, the holy dragon's figure flashed and appeared several thousand meters away. Stop, stop. I didn't lose, it's just that your domain has too much of a restraint on me. Besides, what ability does it count as you 2 fighting against one? The golden light vanished, and Yating flashed, returning to Long Houchen's side. Giving a disdainful glance, she said, I only used half of my strength. You won't be able to hold on. You didn't say you couldn't fight one with 2. Beaten is beaten. As a holy dragon, don't you even have the courage to admit it? If these words came out from Long Houchen, the holy dragon would certainly be unwilling to accept it, but from Yating's mouth, he had no way to refute it. Eastern's king was beside himself with glee as he said, "I didn't expect that the majestic holy dragon would be beaten by an elf. Let's see how dare you come to Eastern in the future." The huge dragon said snappily, "Dwarf, don't be shameless. The elves belong to you, Eastern. Don't put gold on your face. Alright, lose is lose. You passed the second test. However, to be able to suppress me in terms of domain attributes, then I will admit your ability." Long Houchen nodded in response to the holy dragon, "Thank you." The test of the divine throne of eternity and creation was far more difficult than he had imagined, and it was also different from what Yang Haoyu had told him before. According to Yang Haoyu's description, the tests shouldn't have been so difficult. Long Houchen seemed to have easily passed the examination, but in reality, he would have become natural moat in first or second trial if he didn't have the light god domain, and hadn't completed his evolution here, coupled with his own wisdom, experience, and the timely revival of Yating, who was so powerful. It could be said that he could pass these two trials thanks to the combination of wisdom, strength, and luck. Of course, it could also be said that it was the will of heaven. The holy dragon gave Long Houchen a glance. "Although you have passed my test, that doesn't mean you will pass the last test. Your domain attributes will no longer have any advantage in the final trial. I suggest you'd better recover your strength as soon as possible, because the final test is about to begin." Hearing its words, Long Houchen felt both happy and worried, but he didn't hesitate to push his heart of eternity to speed up the process. Opening the 6 wings on his back to its maximum size, with the help of the holy unicorn, he and Yating fully recovered their spiritual energy. What he was worried about was naturally the test that even the holy dragon felt was extremely difficult. The joy in his heart was naturally due to the fact that the test had finally reached its final stage. If he could pass this last test, he would gain the approval of the divine throne of eternity and creation. After Long Houchen and the holy dragon recovered their respective domains, the sky regained its clarity. However, there was something strange about this clarity. Long Houchen felt as if he was being stared at by something. The voice he heard several times before didn't have any hints. The pressure in the air was growing stronger. He did not know what the final test was. However, after battling against the holy dragon, Long Houchen faintly understood that the most difficult test from the divine throne of eternity and creation wasn't to test one's strength, but to test one's humanity and wisdom. It is important, especially in the case of misdirection, to find the right way. Most likely, many of the experts who had been tested had fallen in this regard. Yang Haoyu had told him so. At least, he had failed 2 times in baffling ways. He didn't even know why, but he had already failed. After trying a few times, Yang Haoyu finally concluded that the only thing he had learned was true knowledge. One must not overlook any of the details in the test. Although the experience he gave Long Houchen omitted something, he still reminded him in the end, which helped Long Houchen pass 2 trials in a row due to his strength. He just didn't know what cultivation level the target would have this time. While Long Houchen was pondering, in midair, a white pillar of light fell in a straight line. The pillar of light wasn't that large, and seemed to have a diameter of 10 meters, appearing 50 meters in front of Long Houchen. The clean white color did not give off any energy fluctuations. After about 3 seconds, the pillar of light slowly dissipated, and a figure appeared in the air. "Angel of Eternity!" King Eastern cried out in alarm from not too far away. It was a girl with a tall and slender figure, and from her overall shape, there were many similarities between her and Yating. For example, she was also very beautiful, a kind of noble and superior beauty, but her pride seemed to be inborn, giving people an extremely normal feeling. On her back were 12 wings, just like Yating's. The difference was, Yating's wings were transparent, and her wings were wings. They were somewhat similar to human spiritual wings, but they looked more real. The 12 wings were spotlessly white. Under the illumination of the sunlight, they had a faint luster. The holiness made no one dares to have sense of blasphemy. The same pure white dress hung down. The dress was very simple, but when she wore it on her body, it was like a perfect match. It increased by a bit more, and decreased by a bit. Golden hair and golden eyes, but no aura of light emanated from them. In her right hand, there was a slender white magic staff. The magic staff didn't have any gems embedded on it, but when Long Houchen looked at it, he was immediately captivated by it. What he saw didn't seem to be a magic staff, but a sun, moon, and stars. This magnificent feeling was even greater than Yang Haoyu's universal divine realm. With his heart missing a beat, Long Houchen clearly understood that the powerhouse known as the Angel of Eternity was even more terrifying than he imagined. The Angel of Eternity gave Long Houchen an indifferent glance. Her voice was as cold as her appearance. "If you defeat me, you will pass the test." As she spoke, she lifted the staff in her hand high up in the air, muttering to herself, "Lord of Eternity, grant me your supreme power." The sky instantly turned white, and an inexhaustible oppressive force instantly pressed down on Long Houchen. Although he was very close to that Angel of Eternity, Long Houchen felt as if there was an endless gap between him and her. Long Houchen's light god domain was unconsciously released, but as soon as the rainbow-colored light appeared, it was immediately suppressed by the white light from the outside world. Long Houchen discovered to his astonishment that under the illumination of that white light, his invincible domain gradually disappeared. Although the speed wasn't fast, it was indeed dissipating. That feeling was very similar to being struck by Haoyue's essence of disorder. What was the attribute of her domain? Or was there no attribute? With a thought, Long Houchen forcibly supported his light god's domain outside of his body, sensing the strength of that white light from the contact. There is no need to waste any effort. It is the eternal realm of the Lord of Eternity. Since you are already in the eternal realm, how can you resist this radiance of eternity? The eternal light is the power of primordial chaos. It can suppress and assimilate any attribute. The staff in the Angel of Eternity's hand drew an outline in the air, and a figure of light gradually appeared in front of her. At this time, Yating also made her move, and the huge golden sword appeared once again, aiming straight at the Angel of Eternity. She didn't care who her opponent was, as long as it was in front of Long Houchen, she would help her big brother destroy him. As soon as the king's sword appeared, the white light instantly transformed into streaks of white light that coiled around it. Immediately, the ruler's sword felt as if it was stuck in a quagmire. Although it was constantly chopping at the white light, its power was rapidly being consumed every second, to the extent that Yating's expression changed greatly, and she didn't even use her avatar. Instead, he quickly withdrew the king's sword. The scene of Long Houchen dealing with King Easton and the Holy Dragon appeared once again, only this time it was a reversal of the order of host and guest, Long Houchen being restricted by their domain. If he continued to fight with his domain, he would soon run out of spiritual energy. Moreover, even now, he still couldn't see the extent of the Angel of Eternity's cultivation. "Brother, I'll be your sword," Yating said firmly, and immediately, she leaped up. With a flash of golden light, a heavy sword appeared in front of Long Houchen. Domain confrontation wasn't his opponent, and could only rely on his own strength to break through the blockade. But Long Houchen didn't have a weapon, so Yating could only transform herself into his weapon. The golden greatsword was 7 feet long and nearly a foot wide. There were 18 sharp lines on the edge of the sword, making it seem extremely sharp. At the hilt of the sword, there were many overlapping wings, and the hilt was long and slender. From the tip of the sword to the hilt, there was a transparent line. It was just like a long gem, and an extremely sharp aura flickered and swished in the middle of the line. On this king's sword, there were 8 glows of light. Yes, even more than the 7 colors of the divine equipment. That powerful aura even surpassed that of the violet gold moonlight sword. And the aura it exuded was the pure energy of a king, more compatible with Long Houchen's own light god domain. Lifting up his right hand, Long Houchen grasped this huge sword, and his body trembled slightly. Feeling the connection between his blood and veins, his breath instantly merged with this king's sword. An 8-colored golden light burst forth, forming a curtain of light that separated Long Houchen from the outside world. The misty white luster that had been weakening Long Houchen before immediately stopped affecting him. At the same time, the holy unicorn behind Long Houchen also turned into a multicolored stream of light and landed on Long Houchen's body, turning into a holy armor, fully amplifying his strength. Even the light of eternity can resist. The Angel of Eternity looked at him in surprise. Long Houchen replied in a deep voice, "Your chaotic attribute can obviously be used to communicate with any attribute. However, if any of these attributes are able to reach the pinnacle, it is not something that your primal chaos can swallow. My light is the purest light. Perhaps my domain is no match for yours. But thought you want to weaken me with your domain, you can't do it." As he said that, the 6 wings on Long Houchen's back flapped, and his body turned into a golden flash, appearing in front of the Angel of Eternity like a bolt of lightning. The king's sword in his hand instantly glinted, and a myriad of golden lights scattered in all directions. The body of the Angel of Eternity became illusory, and in the next instant, she was already a kilometer away. "Since my domain can't defeat you, then let's just rely on strength." The Angel of Eternity let out a cold snort, then pointed with her staff. Immediately, a huge white light expanded in front of her. The white light soared upwards, and in the blink of an eye, it had turned into a 1,000-meter-tall giant. This giant was completely white, completely formed from the power of white armor covered its body. No weapons. With a stuffy groan, Long Houchen was sent flying back this time. His expression really changed. This 1,000-meter-tall giant gave him the same feeling he had when facing the demon god emperor. Even though he was no longer as weak as he used to be, and he would not feel completely helpless, however, that terrifying oppression was too much powerful. This Angel of Eternity possessed the same strength as the demon god emperor. The king's sword was raised, and with a flash of golden light, a thick streak of golden lightning shot toward the huge figure of light with an extremely sharp sword intent. The figure of light let out an angry roar, and his entire body let out an explosive sound. A white light gushed out from his body. The sword intent released by the king's sword of Long Houchen was dispersed just like that. In fact, this strike contained the power of the light of trial. The suppression from domain, plus the power of this figure of light, made Long Houchen suddenly feel at the end of his tether. The oppression that figure of light gave him was too strong. It was so strong that even his will was being suppressed. This was an opponent he was completely unable to contend with. But if that was the case, what was the point of the test of the divine throne of eternity and creation? At that very moment, Long Houchen's thoughts were like bolts of lightning. The huge figure of light had already thrown a punch at him. Long Houchen's expression became serious. How firm was his determination? Even if he had to face the demon god emperor's suicidal situation in the past, he didn't intend to admit defeat either. Although his opponent was strong, he wouldn't retreat. Grasping the king's sword with both hands, Long Houchen's eyes glinted brilliantly, and a multicolored flame abruptly rose from them. What he ignited was his own domain. Even if he used up his source energy, he wouldn't admit defeat. Clang! In mid-air, the king's sword clashed with that fist, letting out a resplendent 8-colored light. The multicolored golden flames on Long Houchen's body also burst forth with a dazzling luster. It ferociously struck the fist. However, all of this was only a piece of cake to the white figure of light, and in the next instant, Long Houchen's body was sent flying like an artillery shell. Eastern's king stared and stunned. After the Angel of Eternity appeared, the seal that had been placed on him by the Lord of Nature was lifted. However, when he saw what was happening, his eyes were filled with disbelief. Old dragon. How was this possible? Even if the Angel of Eternity is stronger than you and me, she couldn't be as powerful as this. The Holy Dragon responded with a voice transmission, "You know nothing. This is the test the Lord of Eternity has placed on the human. Angel of Eternity only temporarily obtained the authority to control the eternal realm. If it was in the outside world, even if there were 10 of her, she wouldn't have such a cultivation." Eastern's king said in confusion, "If that's the case, then what the hell am I taking the exam for? Who could have won her?" The Holy Dragon disdainfully said, "What else does your brain have other than muscles? You know nothing. Watch by yourself." Eastern's king was furious. "Hell, if you keep on saying that, I'll smash your butt with a hammer." The Holy Dragon stared at the battlefield. The thing that responded to Eastern's king's fury was one of its 5 dragon claws. However, it had its middle finger erected. In the air, Long Houchen felt the light essence in his body violently shaking, flying a few thousand meters before stabilizing his body. Although the pain from his body was intense, he was surprised to see that he hadn't suffered any serious injuries. On the contrary, the sharpness of the king's sword had left a deep scar on the huge figure of Light's fist. A thought immediately appeared in Long Houchen's mind. This figure of Light's attack power didn't seem as powerful as the one he displayed. The figure of Light's attack didn't stop there. Lifting his right hand in the air, his entire arm actually turned into a 1,000 meters long huge sword, slashing down from the sky. Before the great sword landed, a deep gully had already appeared in the ground a few thousand meters below, causing King Eastern to feel great heartache. However, he did not dare to rush forward to stop. The power that this glowing figure was displaying was truly terrifying. Even if he and the Holy Dragon combined, they wouldn't be a match for him. In the air, all the elemental essence seemed to be mobilized in a split second, and Long Houchen's body was locked in place, making it impossible for him to dodge. Even if space was sealed, even if he had the power to travel through space, he wouldn't be able to escape. This feeling was exactly the same as when he was sealed by the 3 great demon gods in the Star Demon Tower. Blood surged, and Long Houchen's eyes lit up, the hot blood in his body already boiling. The battle at the Star Demon Tower was the biggest failure of his life. For this reason, the CAIRR he loved the most suffered so much before reviving him. Feeling the same sensation once again, Long Houchen's whole body immediately gained a burst of energy. Grasping the king's sword tightly in both hands, the rainbow glow surrounding the sword turned into 8 colors, and a 1-meter diameter area, bright as the sun, lit up the sky. Compressed version, the divine light dance. With the existence of the king's sword, an existence between a divine tool and a supradivine tool, Long Houchen's field of application and amplification had a great change. Boom! The sky was filled with white light, and the powerful cutting power of the divine light dance was able to cut that 1,000-meter long light sword in half. When it arrived in front of Long Houchen once again, its momentum was far inferior to before. The divine snail shield of sun and moon sparkled in 7 colors, turning into an enormous shield above his head. However, the power of that light sword was indeed terrifying, and it smashed Long Houchen ruthlessly into the ravine on the ground. As he hovered in midair, he coughed out a mouthful of blood. Lifting his feet, he took a step forward, directly aiming for the place where Long Houchen had just landed. From the looks of it, he wasn't going to give him any chance of survival. However, at that moment, the radiance in the sky suddenly changed. The bright sunlight suddenly dimmed, and the sun began to set in the west. It seemed as if night was about to fall. This change left the Angel of Eternity stunned. However, the light blade still ruthlessly stomped down. The roar of the earth made King Easton close his eyes. With such a terrifying step, even if Long Houchen didn't die, he wouldn't be able to take a single breath. Divine Stone of Sun and Moon. The Eternal Angel stared at the sky, puzzled. The Divine Stone of Sun and Moon was a treasure that contained the purest essence of the sun and moon. With enough power, it could change the entire day and night, changing the time in advance. It had always been one of Easton's greatest treasures, but the Angel of Eternity had heard earlier that the Divine Stone of Sun and Moon had been stolen. Who would have thought that at this time? If it wasn't used by King Easton and the Holy Dragon, it would naturally be Long Houchen. At this time, that mighty and almost invincible figure of light suddenly trembled. Although its movement range was not large, because of its body size, everyone present was still able to see it clearly. Immediately, a strange luster started to spread from under the feet of this figure of light, and its body seemed to solidify. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, black and white. The 9-colored light twinkled, carrying a special kind of gentleness as they ascended. At the same time, the sun and moon in the sky seemed to come to a standstill. Sunlight and moonlight swirled and merged in the air, and the terrifying might of the world caused the Angel of Eternity, the Holy Dragon, and King Easton to shudder. No matter how powerful they were still insignificant in front of the divine might of heaven and earth. Even a god would not be able to contend against heavenly might. Because God was born in heaven and earth. In the blink of an eye, the 9-colored light spread to every corner of the glowing person's body. At this time, the divine light of the sun and moon seemed to have completed its final fusion. An enormous golden and white pillar of light descended from the sky, combining the brilliance of the sun and the moon perfectly, gathering fire with a beautiful luster on that 1,000-meter figure of light. Part 1 end here.